Okay, for those of you online, LJ Hernandez, who wave your hand, LJ, she's online also, but she's the event coordinator, and I just want to give her special recognition for bringing us all here today. Laura Hernandez is behind you, LJ Hernandez. You're going to get some emails from her. She's our event coordinator. She's going to follow up with some recordings and some collect feedback from you. But I just wanted to give her acknowledgement for bringing you here today, ordering the food, making sure everything was set up. So thank you very much, LJ. The other person that I want to introduce is Tim, and he can introduce himself. I just want to point out that LJ is online. For those of you who are online, you should be able to be heard at a reasonable volume in the room. We do not have video connection, so you are going to either speak up or we will pause frequently to ask if there are questions online. For those of you in the room, feel free to raise your hand and interrupt as necessary. We do have quite a bit of content that you see is printed out on in front of you. We will be sending, for those of online, we will be sending the PDF. There's one slide that Tim added that will resend these PDFs to you. Tim, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
My name is Tim Lant. I'm the Director of Program Development for OCAD.
Great. I'm Faye Farmer. I run the Research Development Office, and so we run the very large proposals out of our office if they want what we offer. So it's kind of optional to use our office. I included a brochure because we do offer various services out of my shop. So take that home, leave it here, give it to your friends, do what you want with it. I do want to make sure that everybody has their lunch. Before we start with that, we're going to start. Okay, let's see if I can do that. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe I have to be in the presentation. Oh yeah, that's how it works. Okay, so you're all here. If you're in the right room, you're here for the mid-scale RI1 or RI2. There are 2 opportunities currently on. There are 2 opportunities online. You'll have links to that. They are printed. It's best if you go through them line by line. We highly recommend that. We've excised important parts of the solicitation in the presentation today. However, we have not excised all of what's in the solicitation. So as a good respondent, you are obligated to read those solicitations all the way through. Other resources that Tim wanted to mention and made sure that were included was that this infrastructure report, special report, and the large facilities manual. Do you want to speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, so National Science Foundation has called these 2 reports out. They've been working on the mid-scale infrastructure program for probably the better part of 18 to 24 months already. So the fact that NSF is calling these reports out is a way that we can track their thought process and also find resources that they have. I'll talk to you a little bit more about the NSF Large Facilities Manual later on, but what's key here is that this is probably the best and only source of NSF guidance on some of the operational aspects of how they will internally manage these programs throughout the transitions. Sorry, Mike, I'll speak up. Should I say that again? Mm-hmm. Are we good?
Read everything.
Read everything, okay. I'll repeat myself when we get a little bit further in the presentation so that all that information is audible.
And if you can't hear online, let us know. I am fighting a cold, and he's a soft-spoken person, so it fills a gap, right? What we're looking at fills a gap between the Major Research Instrumentation Award and the Facilities Award. So it was an identified gap that has existed and been examined for the last 2 years. So reasonably, this is the next slide. I'll do. Design RI1 and implementation RI1 is the first solicitation. So the first solicitation is RI1, 2 different lanes. They're not calling them tracks. They're not calling them anything. They're just a design and an implementation proposal. So the design goes 600K to 220 million. Sorry, and then the implementation goes 6 million to 20 million. And then RI2 obviously takes up the gap between 20 and 70 million. Both solicitations are expected to be released biannually. Okay, and then we jump into RI1. Again, we parse these with things that we thought were important. They might not be, hopefully they're all important, but there might be additional things that you find important in the solicitation. So I encourage you to read that. It's any combination of equipment, infrastructure, computational. I can read all this. Yeah.
In this figure here, you had MRI. So can you, just for scale, can you tell us where does MRI end and this new thing begin?
Sure. So just for reference, the major research implementation, I think the top is 4 million. Yeah. So one track has a 4 million ceiling. Yeah. And then there's a bottom track for 1 million.
Up to 1.
Up to 1 million. Yeah. I should be looking at Cheryl. All right. So does that help? Okay. I'm not gonna.
What's commissioning?
Starting of a facility. Starting of an instrumentation.
Yeah, starting of an instrumentation and doing verification validation studies to ensure that that instrumentation works and is tunable.
It does not fund operating and maintenance funds for projects. So this is important. And so part of our job at KED is to make sure you're talking to the facilities people that need to be a part of designing this and implementing it over time. You can get a nice new toy, but you need to figure out who's going to operate the toy for the future. Expected to serve a wide community and lead to public access. So there is this NSF generic feel where you have to train the next generation of leaders. You have to have it access to the public and users or professionals. Next generation, both of the RI1 and RI2 talk about training next generation of leaders. Yeah, and both RI1 and RI2, there's gonna be a lot of duplication, and I can identify the paragraphs between the two solicitations, but these 2 bullet points, the last 2 bullet points on the slide that's being presented now on slide 5 are duplicated with RI2. And this one actually strangely just shows up in, well, it shows up in both, strong project management. So we also have, I want you guys to wave your hand. We have project management in the house. Okay, Kevin, you want to introduce yourself and your people and your person?
Kevin Reinhardt, I'm the Director of the Project Management Office at OCAD. We help with the proposal process, treating it more as a project planning for the execution side of things. So responsive proposal, and hopefully working with us, we get something that's executed.
So importantly, they're gonna, we have an engagement with the project management in what KED will support for the pre-proposal cycle. But importantly, you'll see what the level of that support is in this pre-proposal phase. So both of them have pre-proposals. We can't invest as many resources as we want because there's just like 5 of us. So we've come up with this kind of gateway for people who want to take advantage of the resources in KED and how can we distribute that to you. But if on full proposal invite, you will get Kevin and his team, and because this is such a project management heavy exercise, you all also probably get facilities people and other random assorted qualified people on campus. Okay, and then again to Tim's point, where it's the details are in the NSF large facilities manual. It's a dry read, but apparently it's important.
Someone made that bold.
I wanted to call out Elaine Quinn is here she manages the Irish connections, the Irish university connections. International projects are allowable under both solicitations, but they must demonstrate those 1 and 2. So if you are doing something heavy in international, again, it's allowable, but you have to demonstrate the value and the collaboration. In the RI2, you're gonna have to demonstrate significant collaboration and evidence of that collaboration. Again, because it's a $20 million to $70 million effort. Okay, the merit review is interesting, and I as a proposal manager, I always look at the merit review. It's slightly, these are the top ones that you want to look at, but they're also going to review you on project management, cost estimation, and ability to execute. So I want you to look at these, but I also want you to think, I have a different slide for actually the other things they're going to review on your proposal on as well. And especially for the pre-proposal, because this will be competitive. Most of the time NSF, and I don't know anything about this actual competition, but most of the time I've experienced pre-proposals, they have a 10% be invited to full proposal, just as a general guide. So if you have 300, you can make your number out of that. And now I'm gonna have Tim talk about the 2 different sections, lanes, tracks. There's answers there. I'm gonna sit here.
Okay, sounds good. My slides are a little bit different on paper as yours are too, so forgive me if I get off. So I gave a very short introduction of myself. I just told you my name. I should add one piece of important information for you guys. I spent 6 years working in Washington, D.C. was a federal government employee and did a lot of acquisition work there. So one of the things that I hope to do for you guys is help to translate some of the nuance from federal speak and some of the acquisition policies that are in place and how that applies to how we put into such a the downside of that is if I start spewing a bunch of government jargon, you guys have to stop me. So the R1 design track of this, so these are projects that are proposed with between $600,000 up to the ceiling of $20 million for RI1 or $70 million for RI2. These are projects that are going to require working on the design stage of a mid-scale infrastructure scale program. So you can't spend $600,000 to propose something that's only going to cost $1 million. It's got to be big. Okay, so that's what this is. You can cover preliminary, final design, or preparing for a level of readiness to determine feasibility. I have a graphic on this that will pop up in a minute. You can go up to $20 million in this track, but you can propose just design studies that would qualify as going up to the $70 million. Or there's no reason why you couldn't propose something even larger than that, which fall into the NFERC program, which is NSF's major infrastructure category. And as part of the design process, realize that your expenditures are above the ceiling. There's no reason that you would get dinged for that at this stage. We'll now support early phase research and development that addresses technological issues. So you can interpret that as you will. And there's no commitment that NSF is going to commit funds just because they commit to a design program. However, here's kind of where the rubber meets the road with them. So this is one page out of their 250-page facility manual that is highlighted and is in bold. And so I like this slide because it does two major things to help us figure out how to propose for this. One is to provide scope for design projects. Okay? NSF has these stage gates of conceptual design phase, preliminary design phase, and final design phase. So if you're going to propose for a design phase, you need to decide if you want to go through all three of these design phases, and also you need to identify which documentation and which work is already complete that enables you to move forward. NSF internally, so the bottom boxes here, you can see who has this upside down dark gray triangle shows who is going to provide approval of moving into the next design phase under each of these different tracks. So ultimately, you're going to have to, so for MFERC, which this is not, but for MFERC, these budgets have to be incorporated into the National Science Foundation's annual appropriation as a line item, which means it has to have OMB approval, and it also has to have approval from the National Science Board. The guidance that NSF has offered for mid-scale is gray in this area. They do not have a clear-cut mid-scale facilities manual that suggests how to go through each of these design phases. Instead, the large-scale facility handbook says that in consultation with your program officer, you can scale down MFERC or the large facilities guidance as appropriate for your project. Since you're writing a proposal, you don't have a project officer yet that can help make that determination. You have to be successful in making a proposal that says that you're going to do these things, and then you can have that engagement. So it's a gray area. We'll help you navigate it as best as we can, but just bear in mind this is where the bar is set. It's going to come down a little bit when they work out this policy for mid-scale. So if there's something that's truly prohibitive here, I wouldn't worry about it too much. You can make a recommendation that they try to adjust some of these decision approval cycles, but this is what we have to work with as a starting point. Okay? So even as a design phase, there's still 3 explicit NSF policy design phases that they would go through for any large scale project, meaning $100 million plus. So if you're at the $60 million level, they're probably going to want to see, I don't know, 70, 80% of this. Okay. So because this is probably the most complex slide in here, I'll just pause for a second see if you guys have any questions or anything online. Okay, great. Is there a question? Yes, sir.
Is there a real clear-cut definition between design and implementation? I'm coming from NSF.
So it's a very good question. As defined in this document, the answer is yes, but I think if you start picking it apart, you're going to find the answer is no. So one example of that is if you're developing complex instrumentation that requires simulating performance of that instrument as part of an R&D phased approach to building it, you could argue that those simulation studies for expected performance or a design activity, but you're not going to stop with that activity during the implementation phase. So there's one example that I can think of. There's probably a lot of other ways to do it. Assuming that your problem is executed perfectly and your performance metrics are all met and you're on time and on schedule, and there's no risks and no contingencies, then the answer is probably yes. Yes, sir.
And Tim, this is Bill Graves, if I could weigh in. I recall in the solicitation when they were discussing the implementation that they said some advanced design work was permissible in implementation projects. Like if somebody's far into their design and wants to go into implementation, I think they're permitted to finish up.
Yeah, I interpret it the same way as you, Bill. My approach to that, which is probably a good question for a project officer, is that you could propose implementation and final stages of design. There's no reason why you wouldn't be allowed to do that. So should we
Pause for just a second, and I have a special guest today.
Special, but just I wanted to be here. Thank you, Faye, and thank you, Tim. So I really appreciate you all gathering up here because I just want to say a few words only because I have some inside track in this. As part of the member of the Natural Science Board, I had made the pitch when I joined the board a few years ago that we had this big gap, a chasm almost, between what you get in MRI at NSF to what you get in the mega projects that we fund, which is hundreds of millions of dollars scale, like what we do for telescopes in Hawaii or Chile, or the vessels that we fund, or things of that nature. Much more broader scale. But then there is this big chasm in between, tens of millions of dollars, let's say in a $50-100 million scale that gets dropped along the way. And usually, for example, high performance computing, as just one example, an infrastructure would not fall under either this. It will be too small for this. It will be too large for that, and therefore you need a mechanism. So there are many such what we call mid-scale infrastructure projects that needs funding opportunities to be thought about. So we worked on it in the board and the foundation, of course, and spent a lot of time. And I'm very delighted that that has been released now, which means it presents a tremendous opportunity for great ideas that really require investment that is not at this scale or that scale, but really requires the mid-scale of investment, which is $50-100 million scale projects, $25-50-100 million scale projects. So I know we have a number of fantastic ideas at ASU which require that level of investment. So we have a great opportunity here to really make hay of this new announcement that has come out. So I'm glad that you're all here today. Think about it. And I always find that these kinds of gatherings gets two things done. Three things done. One is that people say, well, I've got a great idea and it matches this, it's perfect. That'd be fantastic. But what often happens is you find fellow compatriots who are working on other ideas and you say, well, if I team up with these people, then maybe I've got a better chance of doing that. That has happened in the past. That usually is another outcome. And the third thing is there are other opportunities, not necessarily mid-scale infrastructure, but foundations, other kinds of things in DOD and so on that might be better places to go. For example, DOE now, I talked to a deputy secretary of DOE not too long ago, and he was mentioning how one of the priorities for the DOE in the international collaborations is facilities and infrastructure. And therefore, this might open up some interesting possibilities for us. And so when these ideas are all gathered, then we'll be able to look at what might be other avenues than just MRI for us to be able to target. So from so many perspectives, this gathering becomes very, very valuable. So I'm so grateful on the 19th of December that we have people still in the university and willing to come to a session like this. And that means that you're truly committed to this. And that's what we always seek, is that kind of commitment. And I'm happy to see many faces of my dear friends here. So look forward to working with all of you. And as I always say, we are here to serve. And whatever we can do to help take your ideas and make them a reality, then we are happy to do so. So I just want to say those few words, and I'm thrilled to see the level of engagement and excitement here around this program. So you've got the best of the best of the best people here to help. And my dear colleague, Neil Woodbury, is an amazing intellect, as you all can attest, and he's going to be also be helping in this regard because he's thinking about for our office. He's the senior advisor, helping us in terms of thinking through these what we call tier 3 projects. So Neil, do you have anything to say as I leave?
Just only that I was at the NSF last week, and that this was certainly something very high on their mind. So this is something they're anxious to make major investments in. So
yeah,
let's see.
and some of these will require corporate partnerships. We have a corporate engagement office. Some of these require that. Some of these may require turning a vendor relationship that we have at the university, which either the CFO's office or the CIO's office, has vendor relationships that might then be turned in a way that we can take advantage of that and say, now you partner with this and that. And so those are all opportunities that we should take advantage of. So be mindful of all of that, and let's not leave any tables unturned to make this a very highly competitive proposal. Yeah.
Thank you. Punch, you mentioned very quickly
Yes,
high performance computing. To highlight that is aligned with the opportunity objective?
No, I was just taking it as an example that we start off with, that I made the argument about that. Let's take that as an example. We don't have a mechanism of building large scale infrastructure at a regional scale. We have the Rangers in the Texas Center for High Performance Computing. We have San Diego. We have NCSF, which has been there for a while. But there are other regional nodes that are required. So I advocated for the fact I think that it's one example. That's not the only thing that we're talking about. But that triggered the conversation towards the need for mid-scale research infrastructure being front and center in our thinking of the foundation.
That scale. So I just want to thank you very much, Panch. I know that you're a busy man, so I appreciate you stopping
I'm
by.
running between meetings.
Yeah, go. And so we have Neil for the duration, I think. Yeah, so if we have really tough questions that Ted needs to answer, I'm hunting that way. Okay, and then
Oh, my quick question was, I saw the 2 tracks, but it wasn't clear they were going to 2 different panels. And so were they
actually asked you to submit for one OISE. I think you submit under that operation, and then you're supposed to identify the most appropriate directorates in your application. And that's both for RI1, RI2, and then for the preliminary proposal. And that might change, I think, because based on, again, Tim is saying there's some gray area because it's the first time they released it. So there's opportunity in the first round. There's also lots of risk if you kind of play it wrong. But you'll want to identify your directorates and the most appropriate directorate, and they might come back and change it, I'm sure. There's a special case in RI2 where your LOI is required, and it's I don't think they call out that it's binding for the directorates that you identify, but it is binding to keep your title the same so that they can probably track it over directorates. But I think that's an excellent question. I don't have the absolute the answer for it. But per an earlier conversation with Tim is that if we do have these weird questions, I feel free to email them to us. I'll collect them. And if they're worth escalating to NSF, we'll find a way to funnel those in a uniform way so that we don't all look crazy and ask a bunch of crazy questions. We could probably ask one single crazy question and be fine.
The clearest signal on that I've seen is that this is not a limited submission. They're taking all ideas. The short proposals will be reviewed only by NSF program officers and division directors, not an external peer review process. And then invitations for full proposals will be released. So that's a very clear signal of how they want to handle this. They're compiling information. They were already owed a report to Congress demonstrating the need for this mid-scale program. They wrote so several people in this room submitted very short responses to an RFI about a year ago. So they published a report that says, here's how many we got, here's the level of investment we would need in order to fund all of these, and I anticipate there's going to be a similar analysis of what these proposals look like, how broad they are, what the true scale of this is, and I think that's why they're not limiting proposals now and having internal NSF staff being directly involved in hands-on. And then for the full proposals, those will be externally peer reviewed. Okay, implementation projects. So implementation seems the most straightforward and clear up until you dig deeply into what a planning project is. So implementation is, probably the best way to describe this is going to be shovel-ready projects that already have a demonstrated community of use, that have existing plans that are ready to go through review cycles with National Science Foundation. Making sure that the entire document packages that are required by NSF are in place or can be finished very quickly, and then moving forward with those. So the other way to look at this again is going to be, sorry for jumping a little faster than I intended on that, would be longer term projects that you have a clear pathway forward where you can finish the design phase and move into implementation phase within a couple of years of initiation of the project. Okay. So a couple things here. Key here is does not support the construction of operations of labs, facilities, or the science or operations undertaken with the infrastructure. Okay, so you can't just build a lab, you can't build a facility. And let me say something also about operations. It states in the solicitation a couple of times that this program will not cover operations of the infrastructure and maintenance of the infrastructure. And you are required to write to them about what your plan for ongoing sustainment of those operational costs will be. That can be a little bit tricky if your plan is, we want NSF to fund the infrastructure, and then we're going to come back to NSF in 3 years when the infrastructure is built and ask NSF to staff it and operate it and maintain it for us. Not saying that that's not possible, because they do that for many of their major research programs. But if that's the plan, you're going to have to be explicit about it, and it'll be reviewed appropriately. Yes, Mike.
So with MREFCs, I looked into this a couple of years ago, that, I mean, they say, you know, this is for creating this, you know, initial infrastructure, but, you know, digging deep down into it, ultimately it says, you know, NSF provides this investment with the assumption that they're ultimately will provide some kind of long-term funds for maintenance, operations, and things.
Right.
So do you think that, you know, you're sort of, I know you're hedging because this isn't out yet, so we don't know, but I just wonder if ultimately on these kind of things, at least the implementation size, that would be a kind of an assumption, an unspoken assumption or something down the line on this.
Yeah.
Why would you invest huge amounts of money and then just let it sit? So
yeah, I think, I mean, I can agree with you, and that's a simple answer. If I lean forward and speculate a little bit, rely on the mission of the agency that you're working with. So I don't see anyone other than NSF going down to Antarctica and commercializing it. So that's why NSF has a decadal scale program doing research in Antarctica, and they find interesting ways to tap into it. Similarly with NCAR, I mean, you could argue, but that's one of their major programs. The big radio telescope arrays are major programs. So if you can argue to mission that NSF this is so important and so valuable that NSF is going to do it, or the world's going to leave the United States behind, and it needs to be an ongoing operations and maintenance cost, I would go ahead and do that. I don't see any reason to not do that. If we do it, just do it better than our competition.
yeah, well, so I mean, the question is simply, do you want to put that in, or you just leave this as an unspoken assumption in your proposal? You build this thing and don't talk about, I mean, talk about long-term.
But I think you're speaking to proposal strategy, like how much you want to,
how to think about it.
how to strategize inside your technical narrative. The thing to note is you have 10 pages to make your argument, and I don't know if you're going to get a yes or no from us.
Yeah.
Because I think it's based on what you're proposing,
Sure.
how you're proposing to do it. But we can, if you submit, we can run it up the flagpole and see by consensus what people feel about how you're phrasing it or how you're pitching
how
it.
you phrase all these things. You have to talk about sustainability somehow.
Yeah.
How you manage it.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's why you want to be on KED's radar, so that even if not this year, then in 2 years when you resubmit for a pre-proposal, what have you done over the course of those 2 years? I mean, it's fully my intent to track this submission similarly to the MacArthur 100 and some change. I mean, all of that rolls up into these ideas that are across campus that we can then pull out and say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? I mean, even the MRIs were the major research in the instrumentation is DURUPs and NIH S10s are all alternate avenues for funding and pitching those projects. So if we can even do an NIH S10 in lieu of the next step for MI or the RI1s, what does that progression look like?
I have a couple of questions. One is, could you provide a little more clarification on how it
provides for constructing of mid-scale infrastructure, but it does not support the construction of labs or facilities. Is that meant to imply the building itself, or exactly what is the distinction there?
That's great. So the theme that I interpret, okay, I'm interpreting here, is that they're steering away from general purpose laboratories or compute capabilities and towards user facilities with a defined user community, engaged user community that will come and use whatever is there. So presumably whatever you put in the laboratory could be funded by this for specific scientific purposes or specific capabilities. They've not anywhere said that we're going to rule out construction if it's associated with a requirement-driven need for that construction based on whatever else happens to be part of that concept. So, but it's great. I mean, it's really great. You know, if you write, we need 200,000 square feet of wet lab space that will be a broad user facility for only ASU users. It's probably going to be, that's not what we're asking for. But, if you need a hut that sits underneath a radio telescope or something like that, that hut probably could be included.
Just one other question is there an estimated number of awards in each of these two?
Yeah, we'll just hold off on that and we'll get to it. But there's a total of $210 million that they've identified during this cycle. Okay, major activities again. You wanted to do this.
Oh, I just want to say, just to review, make sure that these things are in your mind as you design your project. These are critical, like fundamental.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, and then because I'm the proposal person, this is what you're doing for your proposal submission. The start date is October 1st, 2019. So it's actually rather close. Right. So the next one, RI2 has another year added to it. So we'll provide the template for your project description. You can choose to use it or not. When we go through the OCAD plan for support, I'll tell you how we'll help you kind of frame that. And then it's pretty NSF-y. I don't know, for those of you who have done NSF, this is pretty fundamental. But make those 10 pages sing and you're good to go.
A date for the pre-proposals?
A date, yeah, that'll be on the next slide too. Supplementary docs, you just have to show who you're working with. And this is important. It's an outline of the project execution plan. It's talking, and that's for both design and implementation. I have to look this up. I have not looked it up. And have we ever done a PEP? I don't know. Kevin, have you ever done a PEP?
Or NSF?
NSF. No. So we'll have to look it up and tell you what that is, or you can look it up for yourself. But it's just an outline and talks about what should be included. The full proposal should we have not touched on the full proposal submissions. You want to look at what they are as well, and then kind of inform your pre-proposal on that requirement for the full proposal. You don't want to include results of prior support, data management plan, or links. So that's different from RI2. So just make sure you know that. Okay, so there's the dates that you're looking for. Now, if you don't do anything at all, you still need a research advancement person. So fundamentally, you need a research advancement person if you're going to put in a proposal, a preliminary proposal. Sorry, I was jumping slides. This is the multiple awards, 3 to 10. Who's asking in the back? There's $60 million available. He was adding on, I think, the RI2 award amount.
Yes.
There's no cost sharing. There's one proposal per PI, but not per institution. So you can only be on one. Once the preliminary phase has gone through, you can readjust. If yours doesn't go in, you can be a PI on another one if you choose to strategize that way. Again, key dates. This is really restating what we've gone over already, so I'm fine with that. So design is kind of weird.
Faye, quick question, because I don't remember the answer. Do you know what the award period is?
5 years for
5
both,
years.
5 years for both, and does not operate past that. And they do have a caveat in there that they will determine, they reserve the right for site visits, reverse site visits, and also renewal.
One
Okay.
question, what about like letters, like collaboration
In
letters?
RI1, no collaboration letters. In RI2, only collaboration letters from institutions with subawards.
The partners need to be included or in kind of proposal?
On the preliminary proposal for RI2, again, check the solicitation, but RI1, you don't need letters of collaboration. And in fact, I don't even think you need anything.
Partners or something.
Just a partner list on the COI. Was that what I wrote?
It's just like,
Hey, this is Bill Graves. I read it differently for the RI one, where
Yeah.
collaborations are not actually permitted, but subawards are, and there's this whole consortium thing. And I do think you need letters from the people you're giving subawards that they will carry out their roles. I'm pretty sure. And I'm certain of it for
We'll
international, but I think it's also true of other institutions.
I'll check. Because I know it was a weird discrimination between RI1 and RI2. But
Okay.
yes, we'll double check. I saw that conversation, Bill, and I appreciate you. We'll confirm everything we say.
and one question, maybe I'm going backward.
No, it's
Like question about priority of community research. Like, can this be clarified? What do
Access.
they mean? Like community research priority, what is the community? Is it like the university, Arizona? What is this community research?
NSF has historically organized community of research around their program, so it'd be primarily defined as a scientific community.
Okay. Again, you want to read the solicitation.
What does that mean when it says no science? I don't know what you mean by that.
Oh, it's the,
Fun with science.
it was the science approach was the,
Yeah, and in the solicitation, they're just like, we're not funding the science. Don't
Yeah,
ask
just
for
the
money for the
implementation
science
part.
yet. This is for infrastructure, not facilities, but infrastructure, which could loosely include facilities, right? But it has to be a unified idea that you're going to build infrastructure that's going to enable a capability that the user community is, as soon as they get their funding, they're coming in.
Yeah, again, this is Bill. I think the science is critical, though, that that's what will sell the infrastructure. So you have to say what science you'll do and why the community wants it, but then they're not funding that science, they're funding the instrument
Right.
or the infrastructure.
perfect. Thank you for rephrasing that in proper English.
Okay. The other thing I've heard verbally, it's in the solicitation, but it's not particularly emphasized, but verbally, it seems like that response to community need, boy, they are all marching to some order on that. They really seem to emphasize that. So things like workshop reports or, decadal surveys, things where some, big need has been identified. They want you to show how you're responding to that.
Great, thanks, Bill. A question in the audience?
The second bullet point says must advance fundamental science.
Yeah.
Without doing any science.
No, they're not going to fund. So it's different. It's exactly what Bill suggested, which is this is the need. This is the need for the science. This is what will advance that field.
Okay.
This is the instrument that will do that. And so, and we've gone, implementation's challenging, and I don't know if we have implementation in the room, but implementation means you've gone through all the design specs and you're very close to just purchasing or making it start and go and run, right? So you put all of the car together and you just need the gas. Go, Kevin.
So the planning phase, a lot of times is going to take 5 years. So do we have any impressions as far as what we expect them to rerun this? Is it every 2 years, every 5 years?
It's
What-
two.
Every two?
They use the word biannually. Biannually.
So a planning grant, if you can wrap up in time to get to that next 2-year cycle or the 4-year cycle is kind of your target.
Yeah, and while the term of award is 5 years, I don't know if I have an opinion on whether you want to scope out 5 years of work or not. That's a good question. If you could propose for a 2-year project.
Well, you're-
Proposal takes.
Yeah, so your PEP, which is a required document, articulates what you're going to try to execute on and how you're going to make adjustments if you encounter risk. And it becomes part of their management process. So, so if you want to know how, it's in that document. So it really just becomes an execution and operational issue in order to go through this implementation. It's not very strategic past the design phase. Now, once you've spent that much money on this infrastructure, you're going to have a whole host of other scientific and strategic issues to start to address. So it doesn't go away, but that's the operations and management policy, and it's dense. It's hefty.
Okay, so I wanted to make sure that you understand that the review for the full proposal is cost, schedule, budget review, and site visit, reverse site visit. So if you're getting to that point, it's major stuff. And so it's having a great idea and a flavor that NSF really responds to, and the demand's there. But then it's picking up the hood, going with the car analogy, picking up the hood, making sure there's an engine inside, right? So they're gonna really look at what's manageable, and that's why I asked. Well, project management hangs out with me, but they're really important in this case too, so that they want you need to have something that's deliberate and risk averse in a lot of ways, or at least if there is high risk, how you're going to mitigate it. So this is the important challenge of what's different about these solicitations than other solicitations we've dealt with in the past. I just wanted to call that out. And then your project officers, we were talking about whether we wanted to identify. It does not state that you can't contact project officers. So you could technically communicate with them, and I think others have. So I'm not averse to it. If you feel like it's a group question and we can learn from that question, I'm happy to take that question and see if I can run it through project officers. And it sometimes looks better if we have kind of a unified voice on some of the technical aspects. So I'm happy to take that. Stacy and I have done that for ERCs and things like that. So this is the support plan where KED comes in. If this is all optional, if you want to take advantage of it. So you know that Ponch has an eye on this, and so he will be reading submissions, he will be responding, he will be touching people to make sure that they're responding. The team and concept development is completely on you. By January 10th, what we're going to do is set up an info-ready submission site, which will be concept driven, but it's not going to be a high lift. What will happen is you'll get VPR review, project management, and editorial review. Say, look, we think these are your core messages, and you're doing really great in these areas. Have you thought about this? So it's not like a peer review. It's not saying whether you have a great idea. It's putting your idea on our radar. Project management will say, these are the things that you need to think about as you move forward. VPR says, oh yeah, this is within our core facilities design or what we want to see the school do. So it's really just a way of putting your stuff on our radar and you getting this feedback from the level at which we can provide feedback. We'll turn those around. I will guarantee a first come, first serve review. So if you're in on the 10th, take 2 days. I'll try and get it on everybody's radar and get it out. Can't guarantee it now, but that's kind of my goal. From January 21st to February 1st, you have first come, first serve editing available. You do not have to go into the InfoReady to get that editing. You can simply contact researchdevelopment@asu.edu and submit your proposal, and we will do first come, first serve editing. I have an editor on standby as a consultant. She's super fast. She's super good, very thorough. So you can take advantage of that either way. I will say that there is, well, I don't know. I won't even say that. Okay. And then be conscious of the ORSPA deadline. Because ORSPA is your friend and you should treat them nicely.
When you say editing, what does that mean?
Well, so
we can't write our own proposals, or?
Oh no, well, it's not writing. It's not grant writing, it's editing. So if you need grammar checks, you need points checks or anything like that, we have an editor on standby. We use editing a lot in our office. She was responsible, I was like, the last project she worked on was the Engineering Research Center proposal for EdCap Zandian.
Do you also have graphic support?
Not for pre-proposal, but for full proposal. So the graphic support that we have is very popular, and yeah, and rightly so. But we can't do pre-proposals just because we don't know. We can't estimate how much that workload will be, and he's also got other proposals going on. But once you get to full proposal, you can get full proposal management, full project management, and full graphic support. Okay. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second. Yes.
Questions? Well, two pages or 2 slides ago, you said that the review process would include budget review.
For NSF,
But
for
the,
the full proposal.
but for the, okay, all right, because that's why I said it didn't, the pre-proposal did not require any money.
No, it's a high level budget. Yeah, or it's not even a high level budget.
I mean, you have to make sure you justify that you're in that
Span.
600K to 2 to 6 million or whatever, or 20 million.
I think if you look at what's required, it was very preliminary proposal, so it was very idea-ish.
This is Bill again. I think it was a little more specific. They said you didn't need vendor cost estimates,
But you could
but you did need solid cost estimates, and they had a term from that large facilities manual. So I think Congress has been killing them on their cost overruns. So they want your basis of estimate, a BOE or something. So they want you to do a fairly formal cost estimate, I believe.
I know I read it for the RI2 last night, so I read RI1 2 weeks ago when it came out. So.
Okay, yeah, I'm focused on RI1, and yes, you don't need vendor estimate, you don't need vendor quotes, but you need solid estimates with a formal basis.
Yeah, and then RI2, I think it's the same situation, so go for it. Okay, and then so RI2, I know we're coming to the end of.
Question. Quick question.
Sure.
So for instance, I know, I guess it's also about budget. I know about how to get vendor estimates, even though it may or may not be necessary. But what about if there are going to be some infrastructure requirements in order to make a facility suitable for particular instrumentation?
So
what do I do for that?
Absolutely great question. And I'm connecting with Tom Coella, the core facilities manager, and Cheryl Conrad about that discussion. I'm next going to take this recording and send this to them and the PDF of the presentation and say, we need to integrate with you, and I don't know how. So I will have that answer in the next, 2 weeks when everybody comes back from holiday.
Because I have no idea how to estimate those things.
Yeah, well, and even finding the spot where you want to live and making sure everybody is aware of where you want it to live, right? So we all know that that's challenging for space on campus that's out of space. So this is a good question, and I don't have the answer, but I will. Okay, so for RI2, we're just going to go over, again, it's the bigger effort, so we're not sure who's in the room or wants to admit thinking RI2. Yeah, of course. Chris Hansberg is going to go RI2. Yes! Okay, so for this, we're going to, did we agree that you're going to do it?
I can do it. Okay, so that big messy flowchart diagram that was slide 8 that I showed you guys and said this is the decision process for planning. You're done with all of that. All of those documents are in place. You got your PEP, feeling really confident about it. You got project management in place. And the only thing you need is a check. So preliminary proposals and full proposals should indicate whether activities are anticipated the natural and cultural environment for renovation, construction of major fixed equipment installations. Those all are allowable, and you have to address how that's going to fit where and what it's going to be to everyone around. Okay. You have to have facilities, equipment, and other resources here. Oops. Description should not include any quantifiable financial information. Okay, just say that it's going to be extremely expensive. Mature, implementation ready, cyber infrastructure. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about cyber. So this is directly from the RFP. This is the language that they have. The way that I interpret this, Barnaby,
yes,
they encourage you to put your computational and cyber needs in these proposals to build out your cyber capabilities so that your user community has the tools and resources they need in order to do their science. Similar to facilities, they don't want general purpose cyber. So the proposals that say, we are going to build a $60 million HPC center and it will support any science imaginable is probably not what they're looking for. What is gray, what I think is specifically a gray area, is what if you want to do a novel type of cyber that is specific to scientific pursuits in the domain of cyber? I don't know. They don't address that. So it's not broad provisioning of HPC instrumentation, but it is limited to just cyber. So I don't know. That's probably going to emerge as one of the FAQs if and when NSF gets around to posting those. And I'll keep an eye on it and let you know if I see something really interesting. Okay. And then international projects, it's exactly the same rules for RI1. International is allowable, although they're looking for value added to the United States, meaning you must have international cooperation in order to help you do what you want to do, or they have to contribute something that you don't. Will not fund pre-implementation research and development, other community or technical preparatory activities. Okay, so that's RI1 or before RI1. Will not fund the science research except for validation and operational capability, right? So if you're doing simulation studies to show that this thing works before you turn it on, then you can do that, and that could be publishable science. Post-implementation research operations and maintenance. Again, that major infrastructure document explains how to compute O&M costs for out years that are part of your planning efforts so that they're not making investments that don't have any sustainment costs. So it's addressed in there, and you're queuing yourself up to get in line for NSF or other support in these areas, but they don't want it as part of this investment. And general purpose support systems and equipment that are not directly required for the implementation and eventual operation of the infrastructure. So don't buy a piece of enterprise HR software with this, right? It's not relevant. Be focused. If you're doing work on satellites, do satellites. If you're doing work on telescopes, do telescopes. If you're doing work on laser beams, do laser beams. Okay, letter of intent, February 8th. So
this one gets scary.
You want to do this one?
Yeah, it's really, really specific. So I wanted to go into details that it does have to go through ORSPA. So there's a 3-day ORSPA deadline written into my contract, my presentation, because ORSPA is your friend. The names, departments of all senior personnel. Importantly, the title has to align with this, and it is, again, it rolls over to the full proposal, so make sure that stays the same. So by the time that this is submitted, you have to know all of these things, which is a large lift. Yeah, and the need for the project and target disciplines. So yeah, that's it. Okay, so the preliminary proposal for this guy is the same, but it does include prior support and biographical sketches. So it's not a lot different. Oh, and I just confirmed that confirming Bill's estimation of the budget. I don't know why I dropped off that slide, but budget and budget justification, including budgets for any sub-awards, does apply to RI1. So in the same way, this does budget and budget justification, including budgets for any sub-awards, same rules for RI1, but here, actually, I think it's all the same. Cost estimates may be preliminary with the basis of estimate. Yep, same. Okay, start date is August 1st, 2020. So it's, again, a year after RI1. Is there a question on that?
The preliminaries due a week after the LOI on this?
No, you're jumping ahead. It's a different timeline for this one. So here's your letter of intent.
Got it.
And then the ORSPA deadline's March 6th. It is confusing. So I would recommend, if you're going after, either print the one that you are most enamored of and print that out, just so that, and it benefits me, because if you do want to use our system, you know when you're supposed to submit it. But it is just off a little bit. This same editor will be available for this planning spot too. And again, it's not contingent. You don't have to submit to InfoReady to get the first come, first serve editing. I've also put no limits on editing. If you don't like her, don't use her. But if you do like her and you want to use her again in this time frame, you are more than welcome to do so. I will pay for it all. Okay, so I just want to go over the grant type. So there are 4 to 6 awards in this category. Again, it's biennial. And no more than 2 proposals per PI and co-PI. So after the preliminary, if you are not advanced in the preliminary phase of the full proposal, then you can swap ships and you can be a PI and something else. Again, key dates. So if you get in, your full proposal, your summer is done. And then the project officers are at the end. We'll treat questions to this the same as, oh, I did so much animation. well, if you have questions that are generically applicable to either one, I'm happy to roll those up, discuss them with Tim, try and figure out an answer, and with the resources we have on campus, but also boil them or bubble them up to NSF if need be. We don't have a great way of interfacing with this team, so I'll just probably send out emails and BCC everybody. So if you know somebody who should be on that list, feel free to let me know. Again, it's this weird overlap, so I would print out the due dates, just keep them nearby. If you're thinking of doing this in 2 years, go ahead and start planning for that too. I think this is why we have these kickoffs. Next steps, you have to notify your research advancement person. So please let them know you're at least thinking about it so that they can start preparing and reading the solicitation, because the preliminary is not a huge lift, but they do need to be prepared. Design your team, develop your project management and financial plan, consider participating in our plan of support, and submit. Questions? Yes, in the back.
To summarize the participation, it's independent if one participates as a PI on RI1 and on RI2.
My understanding is yes, they are independent. You can be a PI on both, but not on multiples within the solicitation.
But co-PIs.
Co-PIs are only restricted in RI1, but not in RI2. RI2 has the restriction for co-PI. Again, confirm everything in the solicitation and talk to your research advancement person, because they will also read it and confirm your suspicion. But that's my reading of it.
And any input on like government, like some partners from governmental agencies and stuff?
Input from government agencies?
No partnerships.
Partnerships, like say City of Tempe wants to give you a room to do your.
Or like, yeah, and then.
It's not a requirement.
I don't think it's
I know
mentioned.
it's not a requirement, but is it allowed?
Everything's allowable if it's not restricted. If it's not disallowed, it's allowed. Yeah. If there's some award to the city too, you might want to think about that as an option. Again, it's strategy, right? So what do you want to show and what do you want to commit to? It's a good discussion point.
Unless it's an organization that's not allowed to take money from NSF, right? So the national laboratories are a good example of this. They can't really ask for money under this program.
And where can we find this list of like?
Oh, eligible organizations. It's like the
it's
second.
Published. Yeah, it's published as part of it.
Second or third section of that. Any other questions? Yeah, in the back.
Is there a percentage that should be dedicated or allocated to a larger, broader audience outside of the user base that you're looking at, or is that inconsequential?
I mean, broader impacts is going to be part of the evaluation criteria because it's NSF.
But not a minimum percentage or a max.
It can be a unique discriminator depending on how much money or how creative it is.
This program, across all programs that we look at, this program is not prescriptive. It doesn't tell you what they want. It just tells you the size of investment that they're willing to make. So it's pretty blue sky. Knowing that you still have to be true to NSF's mission, the program officers are, they're the folks who are in the directorates on a daily basis. So that's what they know and that's what they care about. So be consistent to NSF's mission, but beyond that, there really are very few prescriptive requirements other than allowable uses of NSF funds.
And so similarly, what we'll do at the end of next year is we'll look at who submitted, what was awarded, and do an evaluation of that, and probably bring this group back together to do a debrief on the experience and then reposition for the next cycle. Because this is a long-term game and we're in it to win it, so we might as well just keep thinking of that cycle again and again and again. So we can
To build on the comment you had offered before, ASU Research Computing can definitely provide some insight as well as some calculations.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm sorry. Barnaby Watson with ASU Research Computing. And part of our larger efforts is to, beyond the facilitation, fomenting of research that you are very much engaged, whatever we can bring to the table to allow for that computational investigation to successfully occur. We can also then involve ourselves within your proposals. You're the driver of the science. All that we would be offering is the consultation around what possible instrumentation, because that's what this is a computational instrument, could be brought to bear to allow your ideas to come to fruition. So
And are you willing to engage on projects that are less than $20 million?
Of course.
So he has cards. I'm sure at the end you want to pick up a card because if not for this engagement, maybe another one.
I'm very easy to find. Barnaby at asu.edu as well.
In case there's overlapping interests in this room or whoever's online listening, you all are in the best position to know who's saying what. Is there going to be a matchmaking, cities research, for example, can be anything that you want it to be. Is there an opportunity, for example, to liaise?
There's always an opportunity. We have not cracked the nut on how that happens though. So part of this is the info-ready kind of gathering of ideas and seeing, have you worked this is duplicative of something else. We've been offering it for a while and I don't know if I have a great model for it. Part of this is also networking, right? So we can take a moment and introduce people who are interested in partnering just real quick and then have follow-up as a result of the communication here. But you can also send me a note and I can connect you. Oftentimes we get weird requests and say, I need somebody in AI. And so we generate a list of everybody who's in AI, any way, shape, or form of it, and we can send it out to people. So my office, the Competitive Intelligence Group, does that for you. Does that help? Do you want to be offered as a partner? Or do you want
to know what the role is in this particular case? Everybody's going to go in their different directions after this meeting.
All right, so I'm open to suggestions if you want to suggest. Let me start with, I feel bad about asking people who are actually proposing ideas. If you feel comfortable in proposing your idea to the team and pitching it and looking for team members, we can raise our hands and introduce ourselves for that. If that's comfortable, if you're comfortable. If even you feel like it's a nascent idea for 2 years out, that'd be great. Do I have any takers?
Yeah.
Because the guy who brought it up.
I'm a climate scientist. I do regional climate modeling.
What's your name?
Matt Georgescu in geographical sciences and urban planning. I'm interested as all heck in instrumenting all of Phoenix, Sunbelt cities, meteorology, air quality, emergency planning for heat readiness, you name it. Carbon emissions, building level, I don't have the instruments in my head at the moment, but this is the nascent idea. There's a clear computational aspect here in terms of preparedness and multiple ensemble simulations. We need a lot of infrastructure and storage space, and I think that would fit well with Barnaby's mission and high performance computing.
And it's that's a very hot topic right now. Hot, literally and figuratively. But it is very popular right now, and there's a lot out there. So that's great. So talk to Matt after if you have any questions or want to talk to him further. There's a lot going there. Go ahead.
I'm not pitching. I had a question that potentially Punch could answer. The NSB money comes out of like a secret NSB fund, right? But my question was, is the money coming out of the directorates or is it coming elsewhere? Because it would depend then how much directorates are interested. And that could actually, sometimes directorates will then want to put in money. And if you're a social scientist, that would increase your chances of getting funded.
So yeah, so it's a very good question. So I can give you at least a partial answer. NSF has centralized this pool of funding. So this is part of the initiative, the mid-scale infrastructure initiative in the first place, is that NSF looked around and anything in the scale is already automatically qualified as mid-scale infrastructure to them, but they didn't have a central pool outside of the directorates, and so they established that mechanism. It is now central. So the funds that are here are central. I believe that divisions could chip in,
but they don't have to.
But they don't have to, because that's not the spirit of this. And there's also, NSF has their internal budget processes that they have to go through that probably involve things like scraping funds at the end of the year and banking and borrowing from friends, from other directorates, through co-sponsorship and other ideas. So all of those mechanisms are still in play. There's no issue with that. And then the secret pot of funds that you're referring to can be tracked through OMB annual budget type information as part of the request. So in the government, they'll call it color of money. So O&M funds are different than R&D funds. So that's why this won't fund O&M, but it's there and it goes through the normal federal budget process And if anyone's really interested in that, I like looking stuff like this up because I think it's fun if you can find it. I'm happy to do that. It's probably not useful for the proposal exercise.
You will take the time. So I wanted to, Gwen, did you want to like pitch your project?
Yeah, so
Or
what,
pitch yourself?
I'm Gwen Gordon. I'm over in School of Earth and Space Exploration. So what we're kind of looking toward is building a large scale kind of, you know, tail to nose environmental analytical facility that would provide training and everything from borrowing environmental sampling equipment to all the standard environmental analyses and also doing a lot of virtual training. So we're looking at maybe replacing a lot of existing infrastructure that's quite aging, but also really putting a new spin on it and making it kind of almost a regional facility.
There's a new, just for kicks, there's a new citizen scientist project out of SFIS. It's probably a year old, about environmental sampling and environmental studies for students, and that's a good broader impact. I'll tell you, that resonates. You want to pitch yourself? Oh, sorry. Did you want a question?
No.
Oh, she's gonna pitch.
I have a question.
Oh, a question.
I
Yeah,
have
you
a
should pitch.
question, which is also a pitch.
Okay, so I'll let you. I put you on the back burner twice.
Don't
Go for
worry,
it.
I've talked the whole time. My name is Rick Herbig. I'm from CC also, and I also like analyzing stuff. And I don't care what it is. It's all fun. That makes it very interdisciplinary from my point of view. And I noticed that only the RI2 required you to list 5 different disciplinary areas. But RI1, even though there's less money, it seems like if we could upgrade our equipment, we could expand our collaboration with engineers, with bioscientists, with paleoclimatologists. And is there any reason not to include interdisciplinary?
I think in that case, it's part of the LOI.
This is the LOI.
Yeah, it's a little LOI because I think they're trying to find people who with the qualifications to review and be involved.
So,
but I think that you make that pitch as part of your pre-proposal to say that's a user community and your availability of your interest and your pressing need should cover more than one discipline more than likely.
yeah, our problem has been we've been funded by a community facility grant by NSF for the last almost 20 years in geosciences, but that's not just what we do. We'd like to get that money from other places to help support us.
So maybe if you provide me, I can do a little bit more research and look at what you offer, and then we can send it out to the team and say, these are the kind of things that would intersect with your vision. I can do that. Yeah, whatever it is, to be helpful. Thanks. Ellen?
I just wanted to like, what would international cooperation look like? Would you say it's very encouraged in terms of making a proposal competitive, and how does the funding mechanism work?
So for those of you online in the back, it's how competitively, how is international cooperation perceived in a competitive light? And I don't know if we can answer that question because it's new, and but the fact that they allow it was intriguing to me. And so there's a reason that it's in there, because usually they don't allow it or they don't even mention it, right? So the international cooperation side is called out for a reason. It's great, and that's why we sent it to you. And Plus Alliance, if you're a member of the Plus Alliance, this might be a good coordinating issue, or if you're trying to get research off the ground for the Plus Alliance relationship with King's College, or NWS, I don't know, New Zealand. What you want to do is think about what would take your project or your seed projects and to the next level for this, and potentially pitch it as a pre-proposal. I think that a preliminary proposal would be really intriguing to see if they, and that would feed in, that's my interest is, if we don't pitch any international projects, we will not know how they will relate and score international projects. And so I am intrigued to see if we could put something on paper and get feedback from NSF. Because a majority of our submissions will be declined and not invited for full. So we'll take all that information in as a collective and try and be better the next time. Right?
And just for those of you who are familiar with what I do, it's been mainly Dublin City University, but it's extending beyond that to other institutions who can offer more, particularly in the areas of carbon capture, advanced manufacturing, biologicalization manufacturing, and autonomous vehicles. So keep that in mind.
Similarly, I'll point these people out in the email to you, the little bios and contact stuff too. Any others? Chris?
So the central national need that we are addressing is that ASU is the only facility in the country that can make commercially relevant solar cells. So we plan to expand those capabilities from just serving the ASU and the ERC community to providing a facility that can be nationally used to make solar cells. The scientific justification is that we're going to develop and initiate a branch of new semiconductor physics called photonic engineering to address the central grand challenges in photovoltaics.
Excellent. So if you're interested, are you taking new team members? Or willing to talk to people?
Yes, we're absolutely willing to talk to people. So we obviously need as large a team as possible, and just with the caveat, of course, that it funds facilities, not research. So we are very, very keen to have as many people use the facilities as we can.
So if you can think of unique uses or uses that have not been thought of before, that would be ideal. Final thoughts in the back, yeah.
Hi, I'm Sean Walker. I'm at the School of Social and Behavioral Sciences over in West Campus. So I'm interested in standardizing ways that we collect, share, and also do analysis of social media data. So I'm doing a lot of work around tracking hyperpartisan news, doing web archiving that produces sort of terabytes of data each day. So sort of think of some of the work that like ICPSR and data archives do at Michigan, as well as like TSIS in Germany, as well as like what the Hathi Trust did for analysis of Google Books, allowing digital humanities researchers to work with Google Books data without violating copyright, and then also decreasing the technical requirements. Because right now everybody's sort of spinning their own thing and doing a lot of problematic work. So how can we sort of standardize some of that data access and provide infrastructure for that?
I will say that there's a West Campus contingent here today that I want to recognize, so thank you very much for appearing. But that it's, again, very hot stuff. And it doesn't, and I want to clearly state that it is science. It is not broader impacts what you're doing, right? It's an actual research project. So, and I think there is room for that in this position, and uniquely so. So are you interested in joining a team, leading a team, both, taking all, everybody? Okay, great.
And online, people would like to make a pitch.
Okay, who's first online?
Ming.
Yes. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Oh, great. Hi, this is Ming Zhao from Computer Science, CDC. I don't have a specific idea yet, but I to at least pitch myself. So I work on computer systems, high performance, big data, cloud, you name it. So I like to work with all sorts of applications that have computational or data challenges. So I mean, I think the idea that just pitched, I think they all sound really interesting. I might also think hard and come up with some of my own ideas. So I guess I'm both looking for the opportunity to join a team or maybe need a team of my own. So I just want to briefly introduce myself here. Thank you.
Ming, what's your last name?
Zhao, Z-H-A-O, Ming Zhao.
Okay. And if everyone doesn't mind, I can also send a spreadsheet of everyone that registered with titles, departments, contacts.
That'd be wonderful.
Oh, that would be really helpful. Yeah. Good idea. Yeah.
We'll have other events like this as well. So another person online?
I think so. If anyone else is
Bill
online.
Graves. Yeah. Bill Graves, you know what Bill Graves is doing.
Could that be a Google Doc that could then have another column of saying, I'm interested in, or these are ideas I'd like to share?
Perfect, we will do that.
Just want to say, like, I'm here also because together with our team, we're interested in looking at more infrastructure for autonomous vehicles and for safety, rating and so forth, and testing. So that's what I'm here.
Do you guys know each other? No, Georgescu and Karan. Okay, you guys need to meet. First connection. Barnaby.
Greg Asner is coming in from Carnegie. He's yet to join the university officially, but we've already had
He's already here.
He's already here. Okay.
Saw him yesterday.
And he very much wants to look and explore. His center that's coming in from Carnegie is AI centric. And so softly speaking for him, but not really. He'd be one that I think would be receptive if that aligns to your larger ideas. And there are 30 staff members, deeply focused and experienced on a broad range of disciplines, AI being just the tool that they use to facilitate their science.
So which school?
Geographical
sciences and urban planning.
Yeah, so he's the guy who flies the planes over the
Marshall
forests
Islands
and
yes.
checks for defoliation and challenges in landscape.
And uses intense computing to do this work.
Yeah, so it's pretty impressive. I will make a single pitch for the AI group. So there's a current Google AI for social change pitch out, and there's also a DARPA workshop for AI in March. So if you want and if you know people about that, I'm trying to promote those. So let me know.
Well, and that kind of ties it too. So we've had some very strong collaborative discussions, partnership discussions with NVIDIA around AI, strong cloud virtualization that could then also help within this space. An MRI proposal that we were putting together was looking at virtualizing GPU specifically in a user-centric modality versus a scheduler type of approach. So the traditional HPC, we were putting that off to the side and taking one where the science and the end user was driving the usage and how it was being applied. That may fit to other
a total
ideas.
use case. Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, so I want to be cognizant of people leaving and your time. So make sure if you have any other questions, make sure you chat, introduce yourself to other people. LJ, one more question.
If you parked at Colton and needed validation, come to me and I'll validate it.
Great. And those of you online, thank you very much for participating. I'll send the slides out and the recording out. If you want other people to be on this Google Doc, I'll send a link with that. Actually, probably LJ will. But keep in touch as you go forward and keep those due dates in mind. Have a great holiday season. Be safe. Come back to us in January. Thank you.